Welcome to the Inspire to Invest podcast, where we're sharing stories from real estate investors and how investing has changed their lives. This episode of Inspire to Invest has been brought to you by Cardinal Law. Hey everybody, welcome to Inspire to Invest. I've got Milena Cardinal from Cardinal Law here with me today. She has more than a decade of experience practicing law and seeing her firm to success. She is the go-to expert for untangling complex real estate, corporate, and estate planning conundrums. Known for her innovative and straightforward solutions, Milena and her dynamic team are renowned for their holistic and collaborative approach to legal setups and transactions. She is a coveted speaker at events, associations, and at high-profile gatherings, and she captivates audiences with her wealth of knowledge and charismatic delivery. Her unique perspective breathes fresh air into a wide range of legal topics, making her not only an expert in her field, but also an engaging and entertaining speaker. She's a trailblazer, and she's redefining how law is practiced and presented. So thank you so much for your time today. How are you?
Thank you so much for that glowing introduction. Super happy to be here. I'm excited. I'm fresh off of vacation, so I'm feeling very refreshed and ready to tackle lots of big stuff.
Awesome. So, I've gotten to know you now for the last couple of years, and I know a little bit about your background in law, but maybe you can take us back to the beginning and kind of where things started for you from the legal perspective, but then how that also shifted to becoming more of a focus when it comes to real estate and real estate investing and business.
For sure. Okay, so where can I start? I was always very entrepreneurial. I come from an entrepreneurial family. So when I decided to start my law firm, pretty much from the get-go after I graduated, and at first I had a very Main Street, small town type boutique law firm. We did a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the variety, and actually, sorry, let me take a quick step back, because what I really did is for a couple of years, I practiced criminal law.
Yeah.
It was after that I started my practice. And I always imagined that real estate would be boring, but I totally fell in love with it. And then that's kind of like what propelled me to have more like of a solicitor practice, doing a little bit of everything.
So then how did that kind of come about? Because obviously with criminal law, I think from the outside looking in, I'm sure the public has a very different perspective on how it actually rolls out compared to what it is. But what was it that made you realize like, this maybe isn't for me. Like, let's try this stream instead.
Sure. Well, my focus was on youth criminal justice, meaning representing teenagers. And really it started to eat up at me as my daughter was getting older.
Yeah.
And just not being a good fit for me anymore. It was weighing on me. I did a lot of my tasks, a lot of my day-to-day was basically a social worker. I would look for recovery beds or try to find homes or that type of work. And it was really grueling. So I decided to take a step back, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. And then a friend invited me to a networking event. And so I show up to this networking event. It was like small, like maybe 20 people, and it was one person per industry, and they were still growing the group. And so, new members had to kind of stand up and introduce themselves. And so I stood up and I said, okay, well, I'm a lawyer. And, and this woman in the group goes, woohoo! I still see her face doing it. And
that was the moment. That was the
right?
light bulb.
And at the break, I go see her and I'm like, do you have like a traffic ticket or something I can help you with? And she's like, no, I'm a new mortgage broker and I'm looking for a lawyer to do real estate deals with. And I'm like, I don't do real estate. Pretty much like thinking that stuff's boring. It's not what I want to get into. Her answer, I kid you not, was, oh, you do now. And so I was ready for a change, though. It was really timely.
Yeah.
And we became really good friends. Actually, I'm having breakfast with her tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
So 10 years in, we've become really good friends. She was really passionate about real estate, and she was also a real estate investor herself.
Yeah.
So we kind of grew up together. She gave me my first deal to close as a real estate lawyer, and then taught me a lot about real estate investing. I remember her and her husband decided to flip this fourplex. And so I invested a little bit of money in it, and she would tease me because I would show up in like my lawyer clothes and my high heels and whatever at the site. And so she would tease me. And that's about when I met my husband.
Yeah.
And so I remember taking him to the site of this flip, and he got very interested because my husband's American, so he wasn't allowed to work in Canada, so he was bored, and he was
Yeah.
like, hey, maybe this is something we could do, because
Yeah.
he was allowed to own, he was allowed to invest.
Yeah. The
So we
irony.
decided to do our first flip, and then we started to buy a couple properties, and
Yeah.
then because we had a few properties in town, we were like, hey, let's join some landlord groups. Like I'm a social butterfly. I love hanging out
Yeah.
with people.
Yeah.
So we joined a few like a landlord group, a local landlord group. I started to meet other landlords, other real estate investors, and they would say, well, because you're a lawyer and a real estate investor, I would prefer to work with you as a real estate investor lawyer,
Yeah.
because you're going to have a better understanding of these things, which
Yeah.
were not wrong.
Yeah.
But then it was actually my business coach in 2020, right after the pandemic hit, where I was kind of reconsidering the structure of the firm. We were trying to go virtual as quickly as possible to adapt, to
Yeah.
continue to operate, trying to do all these things. And one day she says, you're never as passionate as when you talk about your clients who are real estate investors, like your real
Yeah.
estate investor
Yeah.
clients. And I was like, oh, you're totally right. I love this stuff so much. And so she said, you should become a real estate investor focused lawyer. And
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't know that was a thing. And she's like, well, make it a thing. So I ended up shifting my niche to
Yeah.
real estate investing
Yeah. No, I think
about,
that makes
about 4
perfect
years ago.
sense.
Yeah, yeah.
What would you say it is then about real estate investing specifically that lights you up so much?
I think it's the creativity.
Yeah.
It's the creativity and the freedom that it brings. I remember telling my husband a few years ago that I would be bored if we only ever did our own deals. I'm
Yeah.
like, I have to have
Yeah.
my hand in like a bunch of different deals at a time. I love working with different clients, using different strategies, right? We have clients who are wholesalers, others that do long-term buy and holds.
Yeah.
We have clients who do quick flips. Like those strategies it's so different. The way that we structure things. I love working with developers. You can get really creative in how you structure deals for developers, whether it's the corporate structure, the financing structure. I
Yeah.
love that stuff. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about, just because you mentioned wholesalers? So I have
Mhm.
met some people at wholesale in the United States, and I understand it can be quite different down there. But can you talk a little bit about how your clients are finding those opportunities here and what that process looks like legally in terms of them finding a property and then flipping the paper and, just kind of
Mhm.
their strategy with regards to that?
Yeah. Well, I actually spoke with someone at an event I was at a couple weeks ago, and he told me about bird dogging.
Yeah.
I think I got that right.
Yeah.
I'd never heard the term before.
Yeah.
And basically what he explained is that he flips a property, or he wholesales a property, but he never gets it under contract. He
Yeah.
basically just gets a referral fee.
Yeah.
So I guess some people do it that way. I've never worked with a client who does it that way, perhaps because they may not need a lawyer. Those clients may not need a lawyer.
Yeah.
But typically, when it comes to wholesaling, where we assist is in getting a very robust agreement of purchase and sale, understanding all the clauses that need to go in to protect the wholesaler, but also make the contract attractive,
Yeah.
because wholesalers sell the contract, not the
Yeah.
property.
Yeah.
So the contract needs to be really attractive to that buyer. So working with the wholesaler to create a very robust contract, and in individual transactions, helping with specific clauses. And then the closing is our job is relatively simple on the
Yeah.
closing. It's
Yeah.
basically just make sure the wholesale fee gets paid, how that wholesale fee gets calculated, all of those things.
So the process be like they find the property, they get it under contract with the seller, and
Mm-hmm.
then during that closing period, whether that's like 60 days, that's where they can kind of shop that deal around to possible buyers. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like they assign the contract without ever closing on the property.
Exactly.
Did I capture
So
that properly?
yeah, so sometimes it's a matter of negotiating extensions if the wholesaler needs a little bit more time.
Yeah.
It's a matter of making sure that not only the wholesaler has time for due diligence, but the buyer also has time for due diligence. So making sure those clauses are properly in place,
Yeah.
trying to limit the liability of the wholesaler if the buyer can't close.
Yeah.
That's a tough one, because most of the time the sellers don't want that,
Yeah.
which is understandable, but maybe
Yeah.
finding some balance within that.
Yeah.
There's different things that we can assist with. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. I do find it really interesting because I know some people that have been very, very successful with it in Florida, because I guess you actually don't have to have home insurance down there. So for people that have
Mm.
been victims of hurricanes and storms and things like that, if they don't have home insurance, they may not have any choice but to really walk away from the home because they can't afford to repair it. So someone will come in, offer them,
Interesting.
whatever price that is below market value, and then, they'll flip them that way. So
Huh.
I just find it interesting. And again, there are some big differences just in terms of how it's handled being south of the border. But I was just curious to see north of the border how that's looking
You're
like,
right.
because I can't say I know very many Canadian wholesalers.
Yeah,
So going
typically
back to,
from a legal
go ahead.
standpoint, the wholesaler gets it under contract under a standard APS and then
Yeah,
will assign it to the buyer through an assignment agreement, which is
yeah,
also an Oreo form. That's what's typically used.
yeah.
And yeah, just making sure those clauses are in place because really all of that legal protection is going to be in Schedule A.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Now, going back to your portfolio, can you talk about what you think is your biggest success to date or something that you're most proud of?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think the one that jazzes me the most is our land banking deal. So, realtors brought up that there was this land opportunity, 9 acres in Rockland. And it was just outside of what is currently the city core, but it had already been rezoned in the new plan by the city as urban core, that area, which is basically just vacant land,
Yeah,
just raw land. And we had an opportunity to buy it at a really reasonable price, especially compared to other lots and what they were going for in the area, which everything was being swept up by developers. And in fact, some of the land was already being leveled. And the only thing that the city is waiting on in order to approve all of these site plans, which a lot of them have even been submitted to the city, they
yeah,
won't approve them until the sewers come in. So we know there's this waiting period. So we know we had to be able to sit on it for a few
yeah,
years.
yeah,
So we raised on it so we wouldn't have any ongoing cost. The only cost is the taxes, which are very minimal. And so we're basically just sitting on it and waiting, and then we'll see what we do with it. We'll see if
yeah,
we develop it or if we sell it, or maybe we flip the paper, maybe we get a site plan in
yeah.
place on it. We'll see. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a great strategy. There was actually some land that I saw that was close to me that I happened to be driving by, and I didn't go to see it for a few days, and then it sold conditional and then went firm, but it was essentially 10 acres. And the surrounding area, TAC had put in $500 million worth of resources. And then Doug Ford came in and put in the moratorium on building, and all the stuff to do with like the green belt
Mm,
and all that stuff kind of was in flux. So now there's kind of this building ban that will probably be over maybe 7 to 10 years or something like that. But this plot of land where you could either build, 70 detached homes or possibly 150 townhouses. Imagine what that will be worth 7 to 10 years from now, knowing that all those resources are already in
exactly.
place. It's already zoned appropriately, but you have to wait. So I was
Exactly.
like, because you could get, a handful of investors and just raise the money and sit on it and do exactly what you're doing. But yeah, I
Exactly.
unfortunately
The
missed it.
tricky part is to carry it. So for us to
Yeah.
de-risk the project, we didn't want any debt on it.
Yeah.
It was really about buying it cash,
Yeah.
which I mean, I don't know about you, but I didn't have like $1 million cash in my back pocket.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. This was,
so
I
yeah,
think,
we raised it.
3 million. So I was like, if you got 100,000 from 30
Mm,
investors, that can stand to know that's going to take some time, and
exactly.
then you can decide what to do with it later on. But
And
I
savvy
missed that
investors
one.
will know that it's all in balancing and having a variety of things in their investments, right? I've seen
Yeah.
people throw everything at private lending, all with the same type of properties. And
Yeah.
then, the market shifts and then that's a little more difficult.
Yeah.
Or, all in one um, MFT or something like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
or all in stocks or all right.
Yeah.
So I believe in diversity. And so for real estate investors, it's nice to have this type of investment, which is
Yeah.
not dependent on banks. As long as there's enough money to pay the taxes, it's just going to sit there. It's not going
Yeah.
to devalue. I
Yeah.
mean, it might devalue over a short period of time, but over a long period of time, it can't devalue. It
Yeah.
historically wouldn't.
I
And
think it
so,
also comes down to the
yeah.
expectations, right? Like I think if an investor goes in knowing this is like a long-term buy and hold kind of strategy for 7 to 10 years, that's one thing, as opposed to saying,
Mhm.
well, this is 18 months or 2 years, which then later becomes something like 10 years.
Yeah,
There've been a couple of those that I went in thinking there'll be 18 months with the chance to extend twice, and we're 6.5 years in, and we were told it could be another 5 years. And I'm like, what?
yeah,
That's a very different expectation from the standpoint of the investor. So I think as long as you
Exactly.
are very clear from the outset what's involved and what they're looking at, then it can be done very, very well. But moving along to some of those other obstacles and challenges, what are some
Mhm.
of the things that you see more commonly with investors that have run into some issues and snags with their projects? And that may or may not involve investors, but what do you see as something that, has come up a few times?
Um, the shifts that happened, I would say in the last 2 years, when they first happened, they happened really fast. And don't think I don't think they could have been reasonably anticipated to happen that fast and happen that drastically. It
Yeah,
wasn't just the interest rates, it was also the requirements to qualify. And
yeah,
it made a lot of investors have a very, very hard time refinancing.
yeah,
And so there were a lot of investors that were just buying, buying, buying because the market was very um, was was um, was ripe for that. So they were buying a lot, and they were like, okay, like I could afford to sit on this a few months before starting renovating. The
yeah,
problem is by the time they were ready to refinance, the market has shifted. The
yeah,
refinance was more difficult, and a lot of them did not have, in my opinion, a good corporate structure. Um, and that caused a lot of difficulty in the refinance process
yeah,
because banks got very, very tight with on the corporate side and the like the for investment properties.
yeah.
It got a lot harder. So I've seen some investors go under as a result of that. Um, and so even some investors who had the best intentions and were treating their investors well and were making good decisions didn't factor in the changes in the market. And that's unfortunately something that was so unpredictable. I remember for our own portfolio before all of this, I had this like confidence. I had this level of like, yeah, we're good. We're not over leveraged by any means. Our
Yeah,
property value has skyrocketed during the pandemic. We're
yeah.
doing so well. And then the market turned. I was like, oh, okay, maybe not so well. I'm glad I didn't bank on that.
Yeah, yeah,
Because there was a readjustment, there was a shift. Now we had to shift gears from acquisition to actually enduring, right? We had to get to a place of comfort of we can sustain when all of our mortgages come to term, because of course
yeah,
we were financed everything at once. And
yeah,
then it was making sure that we are in a position to endure the change at that point.
yeah,
So it's a challenge. Navigating these waters is difficult.
yeah.
It's not simple. There was also a lot less deals on the market. I almost feel like now there's an uptick. I'm seeing more and more and more properties
Yeah.
coming on the market, but I still think the prices may not be super reasonable. I think sellers are still a little bit,
I feel like they're stuck in that mindset of like 2020,
yeah,
2021, where things were up here. And I think that's one
yeah.
thing that I was talking to a mortgage broker recently, and he was talking about how he doesn't think that we've seen the bottom yet because there's a lot of 5-year mortgages that were set up in 2020,
Mhm.
2021 that were those like, before things started to climb, and they were maybe in that range of 1 to 2%. And with them coming up for renewals, there will probably be a fair amount of people, whether they're homeowners or investors, that won't be able to afford the new mortgages.
Mhm.
And even though they are coming down, they're not going to be what they were. So
Yeah.
obviously that can still have such a big impact. So it'll be really interesting to see like what happens in the next, I guess, 6 to 12 months.
Mhm.
So
And we mostly pay attention to 10 plus units.
yeah,
And what I'm noticing is that it's so difficult to find a property that cash flows. And without cash flow, good luck finding investors willing to invest in your project,
yeah, yeah,
right? And
yeah,
so unless you have a very, very robust plan to grow the value and refinance and then cash flow really quickly,
yeah,
which is really difficult because of the rental rules, right?
yeah,
So there's a lot of complexity right now for investors buying multifamily because simply they don't cash flow. Even though the rates are coming down, it's still very difficult to find properties that cash flow
yeah.
from what I've seen. Not that
Yeah, I
I'm,
mean, especially here in Ontario. Like, I think if you are
Mhm.
willing to look in other places, that may be a different discussion. But for us
Yeah.
here in Ontario, that's kind of
Yeah.
the hand that we've been dealt at the moment. Since you have
Yeah.
worked with so many different investors and businesses, what would you say is one of the biggest lessons that you've learned just from kind of working with them and their experiences?
I've been speaking about this a lot when I get the opportunity to speak at events and whatnot. I always try to slip in my talk, maybe a little bit of the more boring side of things, which is management of other people's money.
Mhm.
Right? We talk a lot about a lot of these real estate groups and real estate events, right? We talk a lot about other people's money and using other people's money to do projects. And while I think that's fantastic, I think managing other people's money is essential.
Yeah.
And that requires a deep knowledge by the investor of the foundational stuff, like sweating the details, right? Understanding their foundation, understanding finances, being able to provide information at a moment's notice, having standard operating procedures, naming conventions, documents, sorting, all of that stuff should be well established. And then communication with investors, keeping the investors apprised. It's unbelievable the response that we get when we send a monthly email to investors saying this is what's going on. It's 3 lines, maybe a picture. It says like, this is what's going on with the project. We promised we would be here. Either we're here or we've surpassed it, or more likely we're a little bit behind because this and this and this happened and this is how we're fixing it. It's not about the success. It's about honesty and openness. And I think that makes all the difference.
Yeah.
Right? Like treat your investors like you would want to be treated if it was your own money, and the knowledge you would want to have, and make sure that you have the answers. It makes all the difference.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think that having that transparency, integrity, and trust is really fundamental. And even with some of the situations I'm in, like I think there's nothing worse than having to send email after email and no response, or they've said they will send an update at a certain time and they don't send it. I think there is a lot of fear and uncertainty happening in the marketplace right now. So I think those on the active side need to be very sensitive to that, just so that they are managing things appropriately. But on that note, we're just going to take a really brief break for a word from our sponsor, which is Cardinal Law this month, and we'll be right back.
We're investors. We understand investors. I've invested in real estate longer than I've been a lawyer. We help with transactions, but we're not transactional. We approach things from what's the strategy and how this helps clients. They're not sort of dealing with a hodgepodge of corporations and assets and trying to mix it all together in some form of mixing bowl. We work in a collaborative way with our clients to create some form of organized structure and reduce the chaos, take a less is more approach, and we find people are really happy with that.
For more, go to cardinallaw.ca. Is the real estate investment you're considering a gold mine or a landmine? Introducing PropertyCast.io, the black magic of real estate investment analysis. Use PropertyCast.io to analyze and underwrite real estate investment opportunities, unlock the potential of a property, and share professional reports. Jordan McGregor is a commercial realtor and founder of PropertyCast.io. He identified the need to simplify and streamline how properties are underwritten to help investors make better decisions and sound investments. PropertyCast.io is a best-in-class purpose-built tool for real estate investment analysis. To find out more, go to PropertyCast.io, and to sign up, click the link in the show notes. I value transparency, integrity, and trust. If you choose to work with me, you can be assured that business will be conducted honestly and openly. Time is of the essence in this industry, so you can expect nothing short of quick, clear communication from me. I'll keep you informed every step of the way so you feel comfortable throughout this entire process. Our homes are where we eat, sleep, relax, and play. My clients' best interests are at the heart of everything I do. And with this said, my service to you doesn't end when the transaction does. As your realtor, I'll not only help you buy and sell your property, I'll also educate and support you along the way. I want to help you fulfill your goal of home ownership and become your trusted real estate resource for life. I can't wait to share my passion for real estate with you. More importantly, find you the perfect house to turn into your home. Looking to buy, sell, or invest in Durham Region or Toronto? Let's chat. Inspired to Invest is proud to support the Beyond Success program. In today's complex world, it's absolutely crucial for our youth to learn how to take charge of their financial future. We believe that every young person deserves access to accurate, practical financial information. Designed to bridge the gap, the Beyond Success program leverages a comprehensive educational bootcamp to equip young minds with essential financial literacy skills. At Beyond Success, it's not just about teaching financial literacy, it's also about fostering a foundation for a prosperous and empowered future. Join us. Together we can build a brighter financial future for the next generations. Join us. Together we can build a brighter financial future for the next generations. Hey everybody, welcome back to Inspire to Invest. I've got Milena Cardinal here with me from Cardinal Law, and we're talking about everything from successes to challenges and lessons in real estate and real estate investing. And before the break, we were specifically talking about being good stewards of other people's money if you are raising for any projects, which leads me into my next question, which is one of the craziest things have you ever experienced as a real estate investor?
Interesting. Well, I got swept up in the concept of reserving pre-construction condo units and then assigning them when they're ready to close. Unfortunately, the one that we bought was ready to close in, I want to say January 2021, which was like the absolutely worst time to assign. Number one, it's like a harbor. It's a harbor property. The condo's on the water, so like the attraction is the water. It's the summer. The interest rates had just hiked. Property values had come down. There were rules that had come around against non-Canadians buying properties. The non-resident speculation tax had now applied all over Ontario. It was a comedy of errors. How everything was horrible. But I firmly believe that everybody has to make one bad investment at one point. And we ended up closing on the skin of our teeth. We were extremely lucky that we were able to close. But yeah, that one hurt. That one hurt for sure. The one that was supposed to be easy was the one that hurt.
And it'll be interesting talking about the condo market just because there are so many, they say shovels in the ground in the last couple of years, and that has gone down. So with the number of new condos that are expected to kind of come out within the next 1 to 2 years time, it'll be really interesting to see what that consequence is on condo prices and stuff like that, and even people's ability to close, if there's any issues that blow back on the builders and the developers. Now I know you also have a really interesting short-term rental, which you mentioned. I think it's an inn that is automated. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yes, actually, I really, really love this property. So our office building that we were in before, which I purchased in 2013, when we grew out of the firm grew out of that space. And so that's when we moved in the building we're now. And so we didn't really know what to do with this beautiful century home because we'd been using it as an office for 9 years. We had this parking lot in the back that we had to build. That was then making it very unattractive as a home. And in Cornwall, commercial buildings don't hold the same value. And so the concern with selling it as a commercial building was we would have to take a bit of a dive on the value. If we sold it residential, we needed to pay the HSD, plus it wasn't that attractive as a residential, again, because of the parking. We toyed with the idea of literally cutting it apart and making it into a 4-unit. And it's certainly large enough for that, but it would have taken away so much of the beauty and the charm. And so my husband decided to make it into this beautiful inn that's managed on Airbnb. So it's a 5-bedroom plus a side suite inn where all the rooms are different styles. So we have like a beach room and a romantic room and a retro room, a boho room, and a Western room.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he did
a
really
good job. I'll include a link to that in the show notes for anyone that wants to check it out if they're passing through Cornwall for any period of time.
For sure, I'd love that. Yeah.
So how you found managing that? Because obviously short-term rentals are really an active business. So is your husband primarily the one that's taking care of like turning over the rooms or managing cleaning and things like that?
Yes, he was able to focus solely on our properties about 3 years ago. He quit his job to work on our properties, and so he manages that as well. And it's self-managed on Airbnb, so it's not manned or anything like that. And then he coordinates the messaging and the cleaning and the management, and we've got some good help too with it.
Awesome.
And yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're able to hold on to it because it sounds like something that's
Yeah.
obviously really special to you. So even though it kind of served its purpose at one point, it's evolved into something even bigger and better and kind of creating memories for people at the same time. Now, we were obviously talking about challenges and lessons and stuff like that. What would you say
Mhm.
is either some of the best advice that you've gotten or advice that you want to pass down to an active or passive real estate investor that is entertaining different real estate opportunities?
I'd say for the passive investor is vet your active investor as well as much as you vet the project.
Yeah.
And it's easy to fall into the trap of saying, oh, this active person was referred to me by someone else, so I trust them. I'm not saying don't, but I'm saying make sure that you vet them in light of the project that they're proposing,
Yeah.
right? I remember for one of my clients, one of their passive investors in a meeting that we'd hosted for their passive investors to ask questions about the structure of the deal and things like that. So sometimes I attend those for my active partners. And one of the passive investors asked, what happens if you die, to my client? I was like, that is a brilliant question.
Yeah. And it's a big
Because,
one.
right,
Yeah.
we invest passively as well. We invest in people before we, like, on even more than we invest in projects.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a brilliant question of what happens, and especially even if you have two investors, but they're a couple, right?
Yeah.
Couples travel together or whatnot. So I thought that was a really brilliant question. And the way
Yeah.
that we ended up resolving it, actually, on a side note, is what I suggested is that I undertook to make sure that their estate planning was in place, and
Yeah.
that they named a knowledgeable real estate investor to take over on the real estate investments side of things,
Yeah.
so that if something happened to both of them, because it was a couple,
Yeah.
that they would name someone who would be able to take over the project and take it to the finish line.
Yeah. I think that's really wise. I was actually part of a group at one point called the Executive Council, and one of our exercises was called a green box exercise. I don't know why green, but the whole purpose was if you died tomorrow, how would your business continue? And at that point in time, I had
Mm.
thousands of people working for me on an event to event basis part-time. And I thought, well, if I'm away, like, how would those people get paid and how would things get resolved? Like my husband doesn't even have my computer password. Like,
Yeah.
so I literally put together like a whole document with, policy numbers, passwords, access instructions, and stuff like that. And when I went to go volunteer in Thailand with some elephants, I was like, well, if I'm going to die, maybe this would be it. So here you go. It's like, just in
We're
case.
way ahead of the game with that.
Yeah, and it sounds really crazy, but it is something that
Yeah.
I know other people and even people that aren't business owners, but a loved one passes away and they don't even know what to do. Like they have
Or
no
become
access to anything,
incapacitated. Yeah.
right? And it sounds really morbid, but I think you want to make sure that you are protecting the people that you are, owe a responsibility to. And it is something that I think you've got to be really mindful of if you have a business or if you're running
Absolutely.
investments.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the other thing in terms of the active partner's knowledge is finances, because, an active partner can have phenomenal knowledge on real estate investing, but if they don't understand how to create financial statements, or how to read financial statements, or, they may not understand the necessity, and then they don't have the ability to actually report on the financials properly and
Yeah.
make good financial decisions on that front.
Yeah.
I actually had an active partner one time in a deal that we had invested passively send me a report on one of those monthly reports. They would send numbers with them, and they had a line for vacancies. And what I was trying to tell them is you have an allocation for 5% vacancy on your actual numbers. That's an underwriting number,
Yeah.
right? You're saying these are the actual rents, and then you're reducing those actual rents. It was a 5% vacancy allowance. The vacancies are the vacancies. Now you're talking actuals.
Yeah.
So it's really important for your active partners to have understanding of financials. Now,
Yeah.
does that mean that that person needs to be fully knowledgeable, or does it just mean that they need to have a team member, or maybe they bring in their accountant or their bookkeeper to assist? That's fine, right? But those are the kinds of questions that I would ask an active partner now that I wouldn't have before. Whereas now I look at it very differently. Now it's not just about mindset and knowledge of the deal, which, yes, is important. I want an active partner who sweats the details. I want to know, I want to, maybe test the waters a little bit by asking, can you provide me this document? Can you provide me this document? Can you show
Yeah.
me financials from your last deal?
And
What
do you
did that
find the
look
active
like?
investors are open to sharing some of those details?
I mean, if they weren't, that would be a red flag for me.
Yeah.
If you're going to be the steward of my $100,000, $200,000,
Yeah.
like I need to know that you're going to be transparent. And as an active partner, 100%,
I mean,
I will give
I
you
agree. Like,
all
I
of
think
it, right?
people who have nothing to hide, hide nothing, right? So at
Yeah.
the end of the day, they should be very transparent. Like, this is the health of our business. But I
Mhm.
think the other thing that really came to light in a situation I'm in is not just the health of that business, but do they have other businesses? And also looking at like, what does the spider web look like, right? Do they have 3 corps? Do they
100%.
have 15? Do they have more than that? Do they have other partners? Like, I
Yeah.
think it's important to understand the full scope because I think it can be very hard to find that detail just by researching and stuff like that, just to find out how many
Yeah.
companies they really own and if there's exposure from any of those other corps and how things are connected and stuff like that.
I realized that I made a mistake when I was raising capital for a deal about 2 years ago, one of our own. I was raising capital, and one of my passive investors said, "But do you have the time to manage this type of project?" And I was like, I made a mistake. I did
Nice.
not loop in my husband and introduce him to my investors. And I need to do that because as I was saying, well, I've got the knowledge. I'm a
Yeah,
lawyer. I've been in this space for like 10 years. We're very knowledgeable. We have all of these doors. I've done all this.
yeah,
Knowledge is not enough. They want to know my attention is going to be where it needs to
yeah,
be. The reality is they're not wrong. I'm a busy lawyer. I don't have time to devote to the projects. That's why
yeah,
my husband had to refocus and be in it 100%. And so
yeah,
that was a mistake of saying, well, my name speaks for itself, which to a degree I'd like to believe that it does.
yeah,
But on the knowledge side, on the due diligence side,
yeah,
on the integrity side, I can't go bankrupt or I lose my license. So
yeah.
I can't lose my investors' money, but also for my investors, it's a reassurance to know that someone is going to be on it and the project's not going to delay because I'm busy.
Yeah, I think that helps to understand the mechanics. And I mean, I've even seen in some instances that there's, 5 general partners and a couple are couples, but they're kind of like not doing anything. Like there could be like one person in each couple that has an active type of employment. It's kind of even like doesn't make sense that they're even necessarily in the GP structure, but just trying to understand again how those mechanics work and how things come together and what
Absolutely.
happens if a GP walks away. Like that happened in one of my investments just in July. The person that was responsible for capital raising was having some different health issues and she just had to step down. So now the company has to kind of restructure and come up with a new plan. And that's like a very pivotal part of their success is the ability to have enough money coming in to remain cash flowing and solvent to see the project through, right? So it does have a really big impact when things like that happen. Now, in terms of what's next for you, what would you say is on your radar and where are you hoping to take this in terms of financial freedom and all of those great things?
Um, my next learning curve is going to be trusts and MFTs. I really love the idea of MFTs and for the right investor at the right time. I think they
Yeah,
can be such phenomenal tools and I'm learning a lot on it right now. And so I think that's one thing I want to delve into more.
yeah.
And so that I can guide clients through it as well.
Now, for someone that's watching or listening that doesn't know what an MFT is, can you
Oh,
explain a little bit about what that is and why that could be beneficial on the active side and also on the passive side?
100%. So an MFT is a mutual fund trust. It's a trust, so it's an entity which its job is to invest in real estate. At least the way that I'm structuring
Yeah,
this one that I'm going to be involved in, and so we're working with a company that specializes in putting these things together.
yeah,
They are a glorious tool because what they allow to do is they allow passive investors to invest in specific projects. So one project can be siloed in the MFT
right.
so that passive investors invest in the specific project that they like and
Yeah,
get the returns and they can invest through their registered funds. So
okay.
RSPs, TFSAs and whatnot as equity partners rather than as debt because otherwise, typically people will invest with registered funds as a mortgage, but then they can't invest in my land banking deal or in those kinds of long-term
Yeah,
buy and holds with their registered funds. And so
yeah,
the MFT allows that gap to be bridged. There are limitations, and it's a lot of management. So it's got to be for the right investor at the right time, especially if the active investor wants to gather the required 150 members or 150 investors in their MFT themselves. I've seen investors make the mistake of, or active partners. I've seen active partners make the mistake of delving very, very deep into that and focusing so much of their attention on that their other projects tend to go to the wayside, and the end result is their investors feeling left behind and not cared for.
Yeah.
So it's important for the right investor to invest in these at the right time.
Yeah.
But they are a really phenomenal tool, and they can allow to raise capital in a much more compliant way and a much more efficient way, while still having the investors invest in the particular project. You could have, if you want, a category that invests in all the projects together, but typically one category of units will invest in one project.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, we were talking about some of the questions that you would ask as a passive investor, and I know we highlighted a couple of them. Would you say that there's any others that you wanted to add to that list?
Oh, there's quite a few things that I would suggest passive investors to ask their active investors, including, do they own their own home? What are other projects that they have? What are projects that they have succeeded in? What projects have they failed? Like as an active partner, I love that question. Like, these are the times that I fell flat on my face, and I'm still here. We're still doing well. So all in all, like, we've made good choices, but every now and then we make bad ones, and we fall on our faces, and we get up and continue. And so I think that's a really good question, is fully understanding past projects, experience in that area. And there's a bunch more I can think of. Some people go as far as getting credit reports to make sure that someone's not overextended, and that they have a history of paying their debts. I would probably do a Google search for criminal records or for just complaints against that person. There's a whole list of things that I can think of, and I'd like to spend a little bit of time and think on it some more, but I think we talked about providing a list. Yeah.
And we'll make sure that that's accessible for anyone that wants to see, because I think there's some of those out of the box questions that people have become, almost too trusting of active investors, and they get excited, they get swept away, and the reality is that there are some incredible losses that we're seeing in our communities, right? I can think of one that I think more than one, but one, for example, was like 11 million owing to 2 million in assets. One was 7 million owing to 1 million in assets. There's other situations right now that are, I think they had 30 billion unsecured to 42 million secured. So think about hundreds and hundreds of people that are being impacted that. And they thought that there was, a certain level of security that kind of came along with some of those investments. But I think the question goes to show, like, you just can never be too careful, and you can never ask too many questions, and you never want to skip the due diligence and having things looked over and looked into by a lawyer, just to make sure that your hard-earned dollars are protected. So we'll make sure that we include some of those questions below, just as a guide to anyone that does want to consider passive real estate investing, because I think if it's done properly, it can be amazing. But you just have to make sure that you are handling things and, dotting your I's and crossing your T's appropriately.
And all we're hearing about right now are the projects that went awry, right? Like, it's what's on everybody's lips. Everybody's talking about it. Yeah, there's a lot of money that's been lost recently in the last couple of years, from either it was mismanaged, either a victim of shifting in the market. There's all kinds of reasons why some of these active investors have failed and swept some of the passive investors with them. And I understand that, but there are millions, if not billions of dollars that are in really safe hands, growing well, right? We just don't hear about those. But there's real estate. I still believe real estate investing is a phenomenal investment. It's, in my opinion, much more secure than a lot of other things. And so, I mean, I'm really passionate about this space. I think it grows wealth, it grows freedom. Really passionate about it.
Now, on that note, since the name of this podcast is Inspire to Invest, I also like to ask people what's a quote that motivates or inspires them?
I think I had one the last time we spoke, and now I can't remember. I should have thought about it. There's so many. There's so many. I'm
There's so many,
a
nothing's
strong
coming to me right
believer
now.
in mindset. Um, I'd say one that was the most influential for me recently, and it may not be directly related, but one that was the most influential to me was at a mastermind group. And we were talking about when you elevate your mindset, especially on wealth and whatnot, sometimes the end result is that some of the people in your network are people that just maybe don't fit with your mindset anymore. And so, we often hear it's lonely at the top. And what that person reminded me, this individual who is a phenomenal success, but also a very humble leader. And he said, it's not lonely at the top, it's lonely in the transition.
Yeah.
So you got to find your tribe. You got to reinvent your tribe as you grow your mindset. And that's what elevates you to the next level. And that's not always easy to do. Actually, it's quite difficult to do. But just remember that it's not lonely at the top. It's lonely in the transition.
Yeah, no, I love that. There's another guest that I was interviewing that talked about that as well. And just, leaving behind the things that don't serve you any further, right?
Mhm.
And just getting in those right rooms and being around the people that are on the same growth trajectory that you're on and how important that is just in the long run. Now, for anyone that wants to get in touch with you to learn more about your opportunities or may need some legal support, what's the best way for them to find you?
I would say the best way is email. And I believe you'll post it, but my email is mcardinal@cardinallaw.ca, or even easier, info@cardinallaw.ca. That will reach me as well.
Perfect.
Or you can also call, and our website is www.cardinallaw.ca, and all of our contact information is on there.
Great. So we'll include all of that in the show notes below. Of course, thank you for your
Awesome.
time, for being here and sharing all your pearls of wisdom with us. If anyone who is watching or listening is enjoying this episode, please make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, and leave us with a review. You can also follow along on social at Inspire to Invest Podcast. And remember, when you invest in yourself, the sky's the limit. Thanks again. Thanks again to Cardinal Law for bringing you this episode of Inspired to Invest. The views represented on this podcast are for general information only and does not constitute investment or other professional advice or an offering of securities. The host and guests featured on Inspired to Invest make no representations as to the performance of any particular investment. Should you decide to make an investment, you are responsible for conducting your own review and analysis. It is recommended that you obtain independent legal, accounting, and tax advice from licensed professionals.